Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. Today is January 29th, 2026. In Calgary here, we have a lot of visitors pouring into town as the Conservative Convention begins today, stretching into Saturday. One person coming into town who the party brass is probably less happy to see is Daniel Tyrie. He is the founder of the Dominion Society. A group of, I don't know what to call them, agitators, provocateurs, maybe they have nicer titles than that, but who was in town to try to stir up the regular boring party procedures that's going on at the convention. And he's joined me in studio here today.
Thanks for having me on, Derek.
Provocateur, agitator, I don't know, is that a fair way to describe you?
Yeah, I'd accept that.
Okay. What's your official title?
I'm the chairman and founder of the Dominion Society.
Okay. So I remember when the Dominion Society launched around a year ago. It's
6 months. Just 6 months.
Just 6 months. Yeah, you're right. Okay, 6 months ago. I guess you've had some impact in 6 months. We'll talk about that impact a little bit. But I remember one of our reporters in the newsroom behind me here just did a very plain, just the facts story. It was, this group is being founded. Here's the people. Here's what they say they're about. And the so-called anti-hate network lost its mind. Like, this is the Fourth Reich coming. These guys are evil, and they're going to kill people. And they demanded an explanation from us about why, not just we wrote a story, but like why you introduced your readers to these people. And I told them, we're on YouTube. I could say what I want. I told them to go fuck themselves. So I mean, like right out of the gate, I guess you guys had some impact, or at least raised some ire. Tell me what the Dominion Society is about.
We're an advocacy group, and we advocate on behalf of what we call heritage Canadians. So we're a group of Canadian nationalists, and our goal is to normalize these ideas, this nationalist worldview, and specifically the concept of remigration.
I talk about remigration fairly often enough, but I guess it can mean different things. There's probably different levels or degrees of remigration. As you see remigration, how would you define it? What's your goal of remigration?
So remigration is the only real solution to the mass immigration crisis that has been imposed on us by the Liberal government. It's a comprehensive set of policies set to reverse the flows of mass immigration in order to maintain Canada's ethnocultural identity. How
do we do that?
Well,
again, there's degrees about how hard we take that. There's light remigration, and there's very, very hard. There's a spectrum about how hard we go.
Yeah. We offer a 10-step plan on our website, a 3-phase 10-step plan ranging from things like an immigration moratorium, a complete shutting down of incoming migration, temporary and permanent, as well as shifts to all sorts of programs. So like we want to cancel the temporary foreign worker program. We want to completely reform the asylum system to cut down on all of these free handouts and stuff, and remove a lot of these pull factors that are encouraging people to come here for kind of a free ride. But also we're looking into solutions to kind of enforce kind of cultural standards, taking inspiration from what we've seen from Quebec, language standards, standards around kind of religious symbols in public spaces and public service, but also changing laws around permanent residency and even naturalized citizenship to allow the government to revoke these things in certain situations, especially in situations to maintain our social cohesion and national security.
I know this is I don't mean this as a gotcha question. I mean it in good faith, and it's a broad question. But who do we want to remigrate? Like at what point we go back? We've had, I'm not one of these people who buys into, well, we're all immigrants. No, someone who landed here in a nearly unpopulated frozen frontier and hacked a civilization out of the wilderness is not an immigrant.
Well said.
They're a pioneer. They're a colonizer in a good sense of the word. I mean, I don't mean it as a pejorative term. I'm like, no, that's a great thing.
Yeah. Best thing they ever have in Canada.
Yeah. So, I guess I might use the same term. I just don't mean it pejoratively. We own it.
Yeah.
What's up, my colonizer? But then we did have waves of immigrants, Ukrainians, Scots, Germans over time. How far back do you want to go where we kind of draw the line and say, okay, at this point we kind of had enough,
Mhm.
and we need to remigrate to that point.
Yeah. I'm very focused on what we call the Trudeau wave. So this is the millions of migrants that came over the last kind of 10 years under Justin Trudeau. People that
So the second Trudeau wave.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's when things really fell off the rails. We saw this massive diversification of Canada, these new streams that got massively expanded, temporary foreign workers and so on. We're very focused on sending the back kind of the most recent that has transformed Canada. But ultimately, it's about maintaining Canada's ethnocultural identity. So there are groups that came years ago that I don't think have integrated into our society. And we do want to offer kind of incentives, even if it's in a voluntary context, for people to return back to their homelands where I think they might be more happy. Mm-hmm. So that's very much our focus. Even as early as the 1900s, we saw these waves of what I would call settlers coming in. You mentioned Ukrainians, Germans. These people did come to the frontier. They might not have roots going back hundreds of years like the kind of original settlers of Eastern Canada, but they still came here into a country that was majority Canadian, assimilated into our culture, and helped settle the younger parts of the country, especially places like here in Calgary and Alberta more generally. So I view these people as heritage Canadians. I view that kind of experience of settlement as foundational to the character of Canada. But that's very different than what we see from modern immigration trends, where people are coming here just for economic opportunity, not risking everything to carve out civilization. So I wouldn't even consider those kind of more early waves of people coming over as immigrants. Really, I think they're settlers, much like the earliest peoples of Canada. So we're very much focused on more recent trends, but people don't realize how recent the kind of transformation of Canada is. Like, even as early as as recently as the 1980s, Canada was a 96% white country. Now we're probably around 60, maybe even lower than that. We'll see during the census later this year. But the mass diversification of Canada, the shift to multiculturalism, is really only 50 years deep, and I like that's not significant roots in this country. I think we can rapidly walk these things back with a dramatic shift in policy ideas. Like, it's politicians who brought these people here, and it's politicians that can send them back.
Well, you're focused on the Trudeau wave, which I think I call the second Trudeau wave.
Sure.
The first Trudeau wave was actually the beginning, not the absolute beginning, but it was the beginning of mass multicultural migration. We had small groups of, say, Sikhs and small groups, small groups, Chinese laborers building the railway. They were very, very small groups. Yeah. Mass multicultural non-European migration began largely in the Trudeau era.
Yeah, well, I actually credit it to Brian Mulroney as the start of mass.
I saw your clip this morning, and you were talking, it was Mulroney and Harper continued this. I mean, it was ramped up to wild new heights, mm-hmm. Or depths, depending on how you're looking at it, under Trudeau II. But I mean, it began with Trudeau the first. The Multiculturalism Act was under Brian Mulroney.
He made it law. And he also shifted Canada from our traditional tap-on, tap-off system, where we would increase immigration rates when the economy was booming and decrease them when the economy was down. He shifted us to a flat figure, which has only increased and increased and increased since then. So I really credit Brian Mulroney with shifting us to a more mass immigration system instead of being kind of this flexible. It was Trudeau Sr. that brought in multicultural, but it was Brian Mulroney that made that law. So it's hard to separate these problems and just lump them all on Trudeau. It has been both parties.
It's so fun to put everything on two guys named Trudeau. But the conservative. I say conservatives are complicit in things. Once they agree with it, then it is considered the broad political consensus. It's now the immigration consensus, which we say that we used to have. The Liberals might start it, or the NDP might be the thin edge of the wedge. The Liberals do it, but as soon as the Conservatives adopt something, well, then it's sacrosanct.
There's no alternative.
People. Yeah. Okay. You talk about immigration going up and down. I was having a chat. I won't name the person, but a white liberal woman the other day, and one of her arguments was, we're talking about ICE in the States and whatnot, and she, like everyone, yeah, we apply everything from America to Canada, and sometimes there's fair parallels, very often not. But she was saying, well, if we remigrate these people, like, prices will go up. Well, prices are going up because we're printing money. But yeah, okay, if we did remigrate a few million people who shouldn't be here, prices would go up. I'm going to have to pay more for my Amazon delivery. I'm going to have to pay more for my Uber Eats. But I'm okay with that. I don't like it. Of course, I'd like these things to be nice and cheap. Primary reason for these things is because we print money. But yes, we're importing cheap third world labor. But at the same time, we're undercutting our own labor market. People born here, people love our culture. They're priced out of the market. They might not be high skilled people, so they're not going to get the top jobs. They're kind of lower end, but there's someone's going to work a few dollars cheaper than them. So they're priced out of the market. But, on the economic level, and for me, the economics is quite secondary to all of this, but the politicians are more comfortable talking about the economic side, and it matters. How important is it that if we do this, you're going to pay more for your Amazon delivery, you're going to pay more for your Uber Eats?
If you ask me, I would prefer a Great Depression to the Great Replacement. There are things that are just more valuable that you just can't put a dollar figure on. And I think that Canada's identity is one of those things. We've seen a massive transformation in our culture over the last few years, in line with this push for multiculturalism, in line with this massive diversification of our country. But I also think that these economic factors are overstated, because something like remigration would have a number of positive impacts on the economy. Immigration, as it stands, is an elite project, right? It benefits a tiny minority at the top at the expense of the average Canadian. It drives down wages. It drives up housing, both rents and actually housing prices. This does benefit a small group of people, but it harms the situation for the vast majority. So I do think it's overstated. We spend billions of dollars supporting mass immigration right now. It was found that over the last 9 years, the government had spent something like $10 billion providing social support, child benefits, stuff like this to non-citizens. We're spending over $1 billion just this year on the interim federal health program, which is the health care provided to asylum claimants, people that just come into our country and claim that they're asylum seekers, most of which are found to be fraudulent. And yet they get a more generous healthcare package than even Canadian citizens. It includes things like prosthetic limbs and therapy and dentistry and things that average Canadians don't get unless they have a separate insurance plan. So we're spending billions of dollars a year to support this mass immigration project. I think we can repurpose a lot of that to support a remigration project. So I really do think the economic side of things is overstated. I don't think we can put a value on Canadian culture and identity, which we're quickly losing.
I want to bring it back to what this is doing to the working class, people at the lower socioeconomic rungs of our society. You talk to unionized workers, and that's a broad spectrum. I'm not talking about like unionized bureaucrats working in Gatineau. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking, the guy who, plows the snow working for the city. Relatively blue collar jobs that are, lower-ish end, but these unions that are supposed to be representing the working class, I don't hear. Maybe you've heard something. I haven't heard a word from any of these guys about mass migration completely undercutting the very bottom rungs, guys who are right below unions. Like unions traditionally support like things like minimum wages that obviously have distortionary effects on the labor market, but they argue that, well, by setting that floor, that kind of moves everybody up a bit. But mass migration undercuts that floor dramatically. It destroys the floor. It sets a floor for people born here, but it establishes a new sub-basement below that undercuts everyone working there. Why do you think it is that, unions or other kinds of organizations that, purport to represent the working class have absolutely nothing to say about this?
Yeah, I think it's chalked up to the kind of cultural revolution pushed by Lester Pearson and Pierre Trudeau, which ultimately became this kind of consensus, this post-national redefinition of the country, which made kind of conversations around immigration, any kind of criticism of it, to be verboten, to be racist. And most kind of institutions, whether it be unions or governments, try and fall within these lines and not kind of ruffle any feathers, shake any branches. So they focus on things that are less controversial, that fit into this very civic identity of what Canada is. But it misses the central point, and that's really, we want to be able, the Dominion Society, we want to be able to kind of provide that space to normalize discussions around identity and immigration. And as these ideas become more popular, as they become more widely discussed, I think we'll see groups, more establishment groups, be it unions or whatnot, take advantage of that space and be more comfortable providing these kind of criticisms, because they are.
Do you think they're just afraid? They're just kind of afraid of the politics and the backlash that someone's going to call them names like racist, etc.?
I think that's a part of it, but I think the other thing is it's almost like a level of cognitive dissonance. Like people, they've internalized immigration as so central to Canadian identity that it's just like not something that can even be questioned on an almost unconscious level. Like it's just a non-factor. And the reality is it's a major factor. It might be the most major factor. So we want to push that into the spotlight. And I think we're already shifting the broader conversation on immigration across the country.
If you talk to, again, I'm not talking about, guys working in Gatineau office towers here, but you talk to these kinds of guys, they care about immigration. Like, probably more than the average, like the mean Canadian on this. But the leadership doesn't talk about it. And I wonder, is it tribal that unquestioned, saying there is the broad political consensus really from Trudeau on, Mulroney brought the Multiculturalism Act. The Harper government had a lot of immigration. Again, nothing compared to what Trudeau II, but I mean, still very high levels of mass immigration. But the left has always been most associated with it. And that goes, even pre-Second World War. Like, that's always kind of been the case. The left has always been less nationalistic.
Egalitarian, universalist.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, is it just tribal? Because, the union movement has, it traditionally came out of the Social Democrat, the SPD in Germany. And it was always kind of directly associated with the center left and the hard left parties. Is it just tribal and just kind of baked into them that, well, we're a union, we're then therefore part of the broader left and center left coalition, and that coalition is pro-immigration, and that's why? It's more of a political tribal thing?
It certainly seems that way. I don't know exactly what can explain the kind of capture, the institutional capture of labor unions. I think they've very much strayed from their kind of original purpose and are just kind of arms of the modern post-national state at this point. And I do think that's a driving factor on why these issues have stagnated over the last 10 years and stuff in particular. But I do think that as these ideas become more popular, we'll see a shift in those institutions towards a message that's more in line with a growing public sentiment.
I'm going to paint things in overly broad terms, so it will be inaccurate, but I'm speaking in general. Groups that are now that have shifted and are now more opposed to mass migration generally are going to be white men, I find, and integrated immigrants. I was at a party before Christmas. I was telling you this before we came on the air. I was talking to this Indian guy, and he had like a Fort Mac drawl or twang. Like, he sounded like a hoser. And this guy, he was Indian, but hyper integrated. He was born in India, but he sounded like more of a hoser than you or I. And this guy, I'd never heard anyone rail so hard against mass migration from India, what it's happening. He's taken blowback because of the quality of some of the people coming now, the number, that it can't be integrated. Guys like him are hard line remigration, white men. Why is it? I don't know. This is maybe a bigger question, but like, it seems like the holdout groups, and it's younger people who are opposed to this. But broadly speaking, and of course, my apologies to the groups about the name, boomers and white urban women are broadly speaking, with millions of exceptions,
Yeah.
are the ones that are doubling down on this. In Canada and the United States, or across the West more broadly, it's the older generation. It's boomers and it's urban white liberal women who are holding on to this despite the evidence before their eyes. What do you chalk that up to? Because one group is seeing the civilization they grew up in being destroyed, and the other group, like in Europe, gets raped on the street. Why? Those seem like the two groups that should most be concerned.
Yeah. I find a lot of boomers are very much living in, still captured in this kind of 1990s, early 2000s kind of conception of immigration, where the numbers aren't what we see today, where they see immigrants as coming here and being a small minority and assimilating into our culture. They see the immigration project as what it was when it was, somewhat functional. They're stuck in the past, and I don't know if it's sort of cognitive dissonance. They're not ready to accept the problem as it is. They're still captured in that post-war universalist kind of consensus where liberalism won the day, whereas young people, they were born into this liberal system, and it's been dysfunctional their entire lives, so they're very willing to adjust to these new ideas. Women in general, in a kind of political science perspective, they often kind of go with the broader public opinion. So they kind of shift later than other groups. They stay where things are popular. This is just kind of the reality of voting patterns of women. But as the situation becomes less safe, as they become a group that perceives the backlash in ways that men might not, as you just pointed out, then they do radically shift over. And I think we've seen that shift more so in European countries, where these things like rape gangs and stuff have been a bigger problem. We haven't seen that quite at scale here in Canada, and I think that might be a result of the source countries that we receive majority of immigration from. But again, as these kind of ideas take off, as they become popular, we're kind of pushing forward a new counterculture, which is kind of strange to some, but that's the reality. And we're putting forward a kind of our message in a very modern and kind of trendy way. And I think as that takes off, we'll see women come over and join with that movement.
Maybe, but I'm not even sure that is proving the case in Europe. I mean, I follow German politics pretty closely. I know in the former East German states, the AfD was the overwhelming choice of young men, but Die Linke, the actual communist party, the legal successor of the East German Communist Party, young women voted overwhelmingly for them. So they just totally split. No one voted for the center left party. No one voted for the center right party or even the Greens. They split to the two ends. So I'm not sure we're even seeing it there, where there's like rape gangs in the streets.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to me that like young women are the most vulnerable group to this kind of thing. And Europe, the source countries they're getting from, it's even more dangerous than what we're getting here. I'm not sure we're even seeing it there, where this crisis is very far advanced. It's not theoretical at all at this point. It's there.
Yeah. No, I think that's a troubling trend in global politics in general. We've seen amongst young men and young women, we've seen a drastic divergence and polarization along kind of right-left lines. We've seen women come much more radically left, and young men become much more radically right. And that's, I think that drives a lot of problems in like the modern dating market and all these things.
Yeah, how do you date with someone that different?
Exactly. It's hard when there's that disconnect in worldview. And I do think ultimately the only real solution is to find ways to to fix that kind of dating market. I think if young men and young women were getting together at younger ages and starting families, that's how we see people become more right-leaning in temperament. Right, once you have a family, once you're entrenched into the kind of future of the country, there is that shift back. But I really think that is the kind of foundational problem there, and the solutions to that is difficult for sure.
Yeah, nothing radicalizes you like having kids.
Yeah.
Actually, the voting trends actually show too. Those women who are kind of on the radical left, as soon as they have kids, they shift quite a bit as well. But yeah, I don't know how people date in this world. I dated a girl once who was a vegetarian. Like, she was great on all scores, but she was a vegetarian.
Oh no!
And I'm a hunter. This is it was doomed to fail. Okay, let's talk a bit about. Actually, I'll get into what you're doing on it. But you talked a bit about ending some of the pull factors we have, bringing mass migration here. And that's some of the. I think that's the easier stuff. It's just like, we're going to stop giving you free shit.
That's this first step. That's close the doors, turn off the taps.
That's the low hanging fruit, and I don't think it would be. It's politically easier to do because it's a fairly easy argument to say, hey, this is not good for us. Let's stop subsidizing something that is actively bad for us. Okay, that's a fairly easy argument to make. But push factors. Yeah, you talk about pull factors. I'm going to talk about push factors. So once we end the pull factors, we're then going to need remigration. Then also requires some sort of push factor.
Yes.
What do you? And again, there's a spectrum of how far along that we go, and you probably start with the easier stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you think about what we need for push factors.
I do think we need to put our foot down and be more exclusive in how we define Canadian and actually enforce those standards for what Canadian culture is. I mentioned a bit earlier about importing some of the ideas, successful policies we've seen in Quebec to make Canada a kind of less multicultural society, to enforce strict kind of language laws and kind of cultural standards to ban certain religious symbols in the public service, in the education systems, to make the situation in Canada a little bit less welcoming and comfortable for immigrants. If they want to live within foreign religions, within foreign cultures, they can do that in their home countries. So that's a big kind of push factor as well. We propose offering what we call a voluntary repatriation system, which would be offering sort of financial incentives or logistical incentives to encourage people to return to their own country. So we've seen like Trump administration do this, offer things like free plane tickets to return back to your country. As the kind of economic taps get turned off, as the culture becomes a bit more exclusive here in Canada, there'll be a lot of incentives for them to go back. So offering them the logistical assistance, helping them with moving fees, or even a financial package like we've seen in Denmark and Sweden to further encourage them to return would all be kind of the earlier steps before we start kind of the carrot, so to speak, before we bring in the stick.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that, I mean, even within that, there'd be different ones. Like the Trump one is giving incentives for illegals to self-deport, I think is the term they're using. But also, we do have a lot who are here as permanent residents, or even citizens. Would you see it at some point getting to where we would give probably a bigger incentive to get someone to voluntarily abrogate or renounce their citizenship or permanent residency and return to the country of origin?
Yeah, that would be exactly this voluntary repatriation program. Giving them a one-time lump sum in order to annul their permanent residency or naturalized citizenship. But as well, like I think we can completely reform a large portion of existing immigrants here are not yet citizens. They are still permanent residents, which is a slightly different class, and as such, they don't have the same kind of constitutional rights as citizens do. So I would reform the permanent residency program and annul all permanent residency to put them back in a temporary basis, and then that would allow us to review all of these permanent residencies and select for people who should actually stay and be shifted to citizens, or have that completely revoked and have them removed. I don't think the same kind of financial incentives are necessary for the permanent resident side of things as they would be for the naturalized citizenship side.
So I think one of the problems you'll run into is like I'm with you on a fair degree of this stuff, but we all know some people who we like here.
Yeah.
They're good. Um, Everyone knows, like every single Canadian knows at least one, probably more, who are like, yeah, okay, there's a big migration problem, and we gotta fix this. But I don't want him gone. That's my neighbor. He's good. That's my coworker. She's good. How do we address that? Because there's going to be a lot of exceptions where, no, this person is integrating. This person is a net contributor. They're not sucking off the taxpayer. They are a net contributor. They're assimilating. Where do we draw the line like that?
At the end of the day, we have to realize that it's not personal, it's necessary. Like, mass immigration and multiculturalism has imposed an existential threat on the Canadian nation, and that needs to be held paramount. We need to maintain our ethnocultural identity, or else we're going to be living in little India within the next few years. So it's like, even though there might be exceptions to the rule, we need to have a hardline stance and send back a lot of people that came here over the last few decades. Ultimately, the priority needs to be around people that are threatening our social cohesion and our national security. Like we're importing criminals and gangs from all over the world. We have the Chinese state operating police stations within our border, compromising our sovereignty. The Canadian government just labeled the Bishnoi gang out of India as a terrorist threat. Like these, I don't care if these people are permanent residents or citizens. Like, these people need to have their statuses stripped away from them, and they need to be removed. We don't propose a plan that says we need to, the Peter Griffin meme with the color. It's like, if you're a certain pigmentation, you're out. That's not what we're putting forward. We need to have sort of standards around social cohesion.
Let's make sure we get the meme up post production here.
We need assimilation. Doesn't just happen. It needs to be enforced. So we need to offer those carrots and sticks, and we need to send people back that aren't meeting our standards. Some people can stay. They have been integrated well into our society. They have offered value. And I think that there is space for that within our society. But ultimately, if we're going to maintain our country, we need to make sure that Canadians don't become a minority in this country. And even further than that, we need to make sure Canadians remain the supermajority in order to make assimilation possible. Right now, it's literally against Canadian policy to assimilate. Like, you're encouraged to maintain these foreign religions, these foreign cultures, these foreign languages. And that's not the recipe for a successful, functional society. So we need to take a hardline stance and shift things back in a different direction.
Yeah, I think even a lot of migrants want that. They want to come to Canada. They don't necessarily want to come to the place they left behind.
People across the spectrum reject mass immigration, right? It's a majority of both Canadians, white Canadians, and immigrants reject. It's 65% of white Canadians reject mass immigration. It's like 56% of immigrants also reject it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk more specifically about the Dominion Society itself. 6 months. You've been around for 6 months. I've seen kind of Instagram reels and stuff like that. It's punchy. It's oh god, I sounded old. It's hip, but it's strong, rousing stuff. You'll cut to some kind of vintage clips of old Mounties or a Highlander band going. It's can't but stir your heart. Now, this is coming from an Alberta nationalist. I'm like, that country I was okay with. That was a country. I grew up as a very Canadian nationalist. I was a Sea Cadet. I went around military bases my whole youth, and I ate that stuff up hard. But so there's that. You've got kind of that online meme lord presence, and you can meme yourself to victory. We've seen it before. But beyond the edits, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, people often kind of over adjust, and you can't just be on social media. They want to see things happening in real life, but we also can't discount the important role that media and social media plays within the broader movement. So that is a big part of our overall strategy. Ultimately, our goal is to normalize a nationalist worldview and the concept of remigration, and kind of meeting people where they're at on social media in a format that they're kind of interested in is an important part of that overall strategy. So those edits are important, reminding people about what Canada was not too long ago. when policies were different and what Canada can be again if we pursue a different direction policy-wise is an important part of our overall strategy. But that is just kind of one part of our kind of 4-point strategy. So in this broader mission to normalize remigration, we kind of have these 4 main pathways. And one of them is that, yes, this media content, but we also have our secondary strategy, which is our grassroots organization. We're building localized chapters and volunteer groups across the country in order to engage in classical kind of grassroots activism, putting up posters, distributing flyers, knocking on doors, organizing protests and demonstrations. That's part 2. Part 3 is our kind of what we call our intellectual development. We're working on a series of white papers to flesh out our 10-point remigration plan into kind of professional, incredible white papers to kind of meet the elites or the government folks where they're at in a format that they're used to. So just like we're meeting kind of younger people on social media, we want to meet older people and more bureaucratic or policy wonk folks where they're at with our series of white papers or green papers. And then finally, we have what we call our institutional infiltration. We're looking to install people within political parties on electoral district associations as candidates, running for local councils, getting involved in community groups. So we have and even in the government and bureaucracy. So we have like-minded Canadian nationalists, a network of them within all these influential organizations. I think back to John Diefenbaker. I'm sure you've read Lament for a Nation, an important text for all Canadian nationalists. One of the core reasons that he failed as the last kind of Canadian nationalist was he had a disunited party and a bureaucracy that was working against him. So we want to kind of take a page out of his failures and look to have this network of well-placed nationalists in political parties and governments. So when we are able to take power, we don't have that same kind of pushback, and we're able to implement our ideas without the kind of being hijacked or distracted by bureaucrats or a disunited political party.
Yeah, you're talking about these white papers. I remember when I was in the Canadian Taxpayers Federation part of my career. Mm-hmm. I remember, I forget his name, but a guy from the Fraser Institute wrote, the Fraser Institute is very smart, but often very dry academic work. Yeah. But, it's a part of the pipeline of the policy process. Mm-hmm. That's, way before it gets to an edit, it comes from, hopefully should come from something grounded in strong academic researched work. And he wrote this piece, just kind of, I vaguely remember it was talking about, well, it's going to have big impacts on like the housing market and stuff. And I remember even in the libertarian circles I was in then, we were like, oh, this is too hot to touch. This is, he's talking about migration in a way that is not glowingly positive. And I'd say that's circa 2010, 2011. And now I think back today, I'm like, that guy's a pussy. That is so soft. When I ran in politics 2015 for the Wild Rose, I wouldn't even vote for myself in 2015. The vibe shift has been radical. Yeah. Like what's in the water?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shift in the global zeitgeist, right? It's not just here in Canada; it's going on around the world. And to be honest, I might get some flack for this. I've got some flack for this, but I think Prime Minister Carney made a good point the other day at Davos when he was meeting with China, when he talked about the shifting New World Order. I do think there is a transformation in the global order from this kind of unipolar system where the Americans are the dominant power to a more bipolar or multipolar system. And I think that inevitably causes the rise of nationalism. And that's why we're seeing this take off, not just in Canada, not just in the US, but all over the world. As the global system becomes more chaotic, more multipolar, there needs to be countries that are more self-interested and more nationalistic. So I think this is a global trend that is kind of downstream from a shifting in the global geopolitical kind of power dynamics, creating this inevitability within every single country. And we're looking to kind of steward that movement kind of from the fringes. We've seen this bubbling to the surface over the last few years. For those that have been paying attention, it's very online, it's very anon, and we're looking to translate that message of that rising nationalism from the fringes right into the mainstream and right into political parties and governments. That's kind of how the purpose of our organization, to streamline that transformation into the broader mainstream conversation.
You do know that we're going to be featured on the Anti-Hate Network. Goes out, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're our biggest fans. They watch everything that I do and they try and tweak it. And
if they don't call you names, you're not my friend.
Exactly. Are you even trying if you haven't had a hit piece of an anti-hate?
Yeah. What do you even lift? Yeah. Okay, well, you talked about also getting people running for office into political parties. Let's talk about that. You know, we've been talking kind of on the meta-political side of things. But down the pipeline of this, I mean, one end you got meme lords and you got guys at the Fraser Institute writing white papers, but further down the line is political power and translating ideas, the metapolitics, into political power. For a time, the PPC looked like it had some potential. I don't think anyone ever thought it was necessarily going to displace the Conservatives, but that it could enter as, for lack of a better term, an NDP of the right, try to pull things in this direction, force the Conservatives to compete with something to their right flank, and would therefore pull them the way that the NDP makes the case traditionally that it can pull the Liberals. It had its high water mark in 2021. You had really kind of a perfect storm for the PPC to break through. You had, with Aaron O'Toole, you had the Conservatives running on a carbon tax that was even worse than Trudeau's. The Conservatives were pro-vaccine passport. They just would not call everybody names. So you're still going to need a passport. We're just not going to call you a piece of shit if you don't have it. That was really the difference. And what did it hit? Like, was it 4%?
4.9.
4.9. Okay, so just a hair under 5. It beat the Green Party in the popular vote, but still translated to no seats. Since then, it seems to have just kind of completely run out of steam. Some of that might have been that Pierre Poilievre shifted the Conservatives.
But I thought the PPC failed to pivot after COVID, right? During COVID, they became very much a single issue party, and they saw a huge rise in support. But then after that, the COVID restrictions were dropped, months after the 2021 election. Pierre Poilievre kind of shifted things a little bit more to the right, or had a bit more brash, populist type messaging, won a lot of support back from the PPC. And I don't think that the PPC has had a very clear identity since the 2021 election. It's hard to know what they stand for. So I think that they could see success if they kind of simplified their message and focused on a single topic, a topic like remigration. Instead, they've kind of become this kind of party, which it's kind of like this general grievance party where they jump on a bunch of different culture war issues. And a lot of it's imported from the United States. And they've kind of made this image as this kind of angry crank party that's hard to get a line behind. I think they should follow their most successful strategy, which was in 2021 when they were a simple single issue party. They should be known as the anti-immigrant folks, just like they were known as the anti-COVID folks, because they have very little political capital. They have little control over the overall conversation. So I think the way they can be most successful is by having a very simple identity that everyone can understand. If you know what the PPC is, you should know that they're for this one issue. I think that would be a more effective way for them to grow. But as it stands, it looks like they're kind of on the decline. I think that the PPC or some similar party does have a role to play in the Canadian kind of ecosystem, just like as you were explaining, just to have that kind of counterweight within the political spectrum to keep the Conservative Party accountable. But they haven't been doing that very effectively.
Well, the other idea would be a takeover or infiltration of the Conservative Party of Canada and, the various provincial Conservative parties of different stripes. But, it's unlike, we're not states where we have primary systems. Canada the Conservative Party will never have a Donald Trump. We don't have a primary system. They could literally just disqualify. Like if the Republican National Committee had the power to disqualify Donald Trump in the 2015 primaries, they would have disqualified him. The Democrats would have disqualified Bernie Sanders.
I mean, they effectively did.
They tried. There's a lot of institutional push they could put on you, but at the end of the day, they can't just say you're not allowed to be on the ballot in the Republican nomination. Whereas in Canada, the leadership committees of the party, or if you're talking about candidates for MP, MLA, the leader themselves who say, I'm not signing your papers, you're not in.
There's more nefarious ways that these things happen behind the scenes.
Yes.
There's 2017 in Mex and Bernier that I think there was a lot of dubious things around there, just like there was around Bernie Sanders. I think Trump was a difficult case because he was threatening to run as an independent, and he could fully fund himself. He wasn't as dependent on the apparatus, so they couldn't just kick him out in the same way, but it would be more difficult in the Canadian system. I agree.
I agree. In Canada, it's just easier for them to just say no, and I do know what you're talking about with Bernier there. I'm in agreement. But in the American system, it's more open to outsiders. You can have a Ron Paul who, votes against forever wars and damn near every spending bill. The Republican House caucus hates his guts, but he always wins the Republican primary, and there's just nothing they can do about it. So they're stuck with him. And also on the left, the Democratic establishment doesn't necessarily like the AOCs of the world. They're crazy, and they would kind of interrupt their kind of monoparty corporatism as well. They don't like kind of the radical left as well. So that's why I think the United States has two parties, is because you can have more diversity within parties.
Sure.
In Canada, you have a fundamental problem with your party. You have almost no choice but to just go start your own party, which is why I think we've got so many. But conservatives in Canada, Alberta in particular, because we have a more recent local example of it, but vote splitting is it's a thing, and it's really something that it affects the left a bit. The Liberals are often able to roll up the NDP vote, say you have to vote for us to stop the Conservatives, and that worked last time. The Conservatives had a historic vote, highest since 1988, yet they picked up a handful of seats. It worked. They rolled up the left flank. It works a bit, but traditionally the left has been willing to at least send some New Democrats to the House of Commons to keep the Liberals accountable, give something harder, more pure. Conservatives have, with the experience of the Reform Party and then the Progressive Conservatives in the 90s, or Alberta, Wild Rose and the Progressive Conservative Party, there's way more hesitancy to so-called split the vote. And I think that's an entitled view often of the establishment Conservative Party to say we're entitled to these votes. These insurgent parties are taking away something that we're owed.
Yeah.
Okay. That is an entitled attitude, but it's not without some merit. But it's harder to take over a party in Canada because they're literally private corporations.
Yeah.
They're private not-for-profit.
Top down.
Yeah, they're not-for-profit corporations, so they're even more tightly controlled than the United States, where they're still fairly tightly controlled. But with the PPC more or less kind of on very much fading away here, is the answer people trying to exert influence within the Conservative Party?
Yeah, I mean, our strategy is this is why we decided not to register as a political party. We're a nonpartisan advocacy group. We're not splitting the vote with anyone. We're looking to popularize a set of ideas in the general culture. I borrow ideas from neo-Marxist Antonio Gramsci of this concept of the metapolitical.
I've been reading some Gramsci lately.
Yeah, exactly. So that politics is downstream from culture. So our efforts are not.
That's Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart said that one, but he's taking from Gramsci. Yeah,
it's a summary of Gramsci's thoughts, and so as such, we're not looking to influence political parties directly, more so indirectly. We want to shift the overall culture to make a set of ideas popular, and the role of political parties is not really to be thought leaders; it's to capitalize on what is popular. So we want to make a set of ideas popular, and then the politicians will fall in line. The thing many people hate most about politicians is that they're not principled, that they're not leaders, that they just stick their finger up in the air and see which way's the wind's blowing. So I think what we need to do as nationalists is be the most powerful damn wind on the horizon and shift things in a different direction. So that's how we're approaching things. We want to get people involved in political parties to extend that influence and to have allies at every level, in government, in parties, and so on. But I wouldn't even limit things to the Conservatives. I think that the Carney Liberals are as likely to adopt our ideas as the Conservative Party might be, even though the Conservative Party might be faster to react. We've seen Carney completely change how the Liberal Party approaches immigration over the last year. Just on the end of the calendar year, we saw this net negative migration, which was Poilievre's big pivot after the election. Mark Carney's already doing it. Negative 20,000 net migration on the end of last year. It's nowhere near good enough. Still, we're but it's compared to Trudeau, 1.2 million people coming in. It's a huge departure. So I think as the ideas become popular, we've seen politicians, whether that be Mark Carney, whether that be Doug Ford, be very reactive to growing anti-immigration sentiment. So we're looking to push that anti-immigration sentiment to pro-remigration sentiment. And I think we can see shifts in all the mainstream parties, not just the Conservatives. But I think we do have a lot of sympathetic minds within the Conservative Party in particular already. So we're looking to put pressure very directly on them. Over the next few days during this convention, we want to use it to highlight that the Conservative Party just isn't very conservative anymore. Poilievre's a former communications director published an op-ed in the Globe and Mail the other day, last weekend, in advance of the convention, a very much puff piece on Poilievre, kind of explaining his vision of conservatism. And it's all about free trade, free market, smaller government. None of this is actually conservative. Like this is liberalism rebranded in blue. And really, like, our country's undergoing the most dramatic transformation in our history. And I don't think you can call yourself a conservative in any meaningful sense unless you're opposing that transformation. And that comes with rejecting mass immigration. And really the only way to stop the demographic transformation of this country at this point is remigration. Like StatsCan released a report at the end of last year that 42% of all births in Canada are to immigrant women. Of that remaining 58%, the majority of that's probably to second, third gen immigrants. Even if we completely close the doors tomorrow, we would probably be a minority in this country within 20 years. The only way to preserve Canadians as the majority in Canada, what I think is a very reasonable position, is to start sending people back. So if the Conservatives are going to be really conservative, they need to start talking about the demographic security, the cultural continuity, the historic identity of Canadians, or else I don't think they're a real alternative to the status quo.
I guess I'll close with kind of a two-part question, and you've already preempted it a bit. The Conservative, you're here in town during the Conservative convention. So what is your mission in the next few days during this convention? And kind of to what you just said there, though, isn't it already too late?
I don't think it is too late. Like, we've seen such a radical shift in the demographic in the Overton window in just the last year. I think we'll see an even more radical shift in the next year. The reality is Canadians are still the majority in this country. And I think if we can align Canadians around this set of credible policies, I think there is a silent majority of people, even immigrants, that agree with our ideas, even if they might not be comfortable saying it. And as we act as that vanguard, that bridgehead to articulate the ideas, to articulate these insecurities that people have been feeling their whole lives, people will be, that's what I believe. That's what I agree with. I didn't even know I liked remigration until that guy introduced me to it. I think we'll see that, like, over the next year, there's been a lot of signals of Canadian nationalism rising. There's been a lot of new groups on the scene that are doing things in a professional capacity. And I think we're going to see a rapid shift of the Overton window over the next year. We're well positioned between elections to transform the conversation. And like, this weekend's going to be a big part of that. We want to really push this. We want to make the conversation over the next few days about, wait, is the Conservative Party even really conservative? Is Poilievre really even conservative? So we have a few plans for the next few days to kind of push that conversation to be a central topic, and we'll see how that goes.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. Welcome to Calgary, and I'll see you at our bail hearing for hate crimes in a few weeks.
Oh yeah. Well, best of luck with that. We'll have to wait to see what Anti-Hate has to say about our conversation today. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for coming in. All right, well, that's Daniel Tyrie of the Dominion Society. Remember, the Western Standard is only $10 a month or $100 a year. Go to westernstandard.news and click on subscribe to get all access to Western Standard content and support the work that we're doing. Thank you very much for joining us, and God bless.